Overpaying for anything sucks, especially socks, so why pay $45 for a single pair of grip socks when you can spend less than half? Pure Grip Socks Pro feature our best materials for optimal fit, moisture wicking, and performance at a fair price, just $16.99 a pair at puregripsocks.com.
Back in March, Puma launched the first major redesign to the Future Z concept in the Future Z 1.3 as worn by Neymar. They were great boots when they first dropped, they're still great boots now, and even though it's only been roughly 4.5 months, we already have a new model, although new is a very loosely used term here because as you can see by the all-new Puma Future Z 1.4, there isn't actually that much new happening here. With that said, there have been a ton of new boots released since March, so given that these aren't that different than the Future Z 1.3 they replace, the question remains, is the Future Z 1.4 still a top tier option given all the other options that are now available? I'll do my best to answer that question as well as go over exactly what has changed coming from the Future Z 1.3 that these replace, including how they fit and feel on feet. So if you're interested in learning more, please stick around, and if you are by chance interested in a pair for yourself, you can pick them up below their normal $200 retail price by way of some exclusive SR4U coupon codes by checking out the first link down below. First things first, we have to address the price. Just like the Future Z 1.3 that it replaces, the 1.4 retails for the same $200, which is by no means inexpensive, but when you compare it to their main alternatives from Nike and Adidas, these are considerably less expensive, where if you want anything with a knit or textile upper from one of those brands from an elite level product, you're gonna pay a minimum of $250. Which brings us to the question of what's actually new, and the answer to that is, well, almost nothing. If you look at the old and new models side by side, it's pretty clear that Puma have not done a lot in terms of redesigning much of anything. The main difference that you're going to find is what's happening here in the forefoot area, the Evo Knit base with what they call advanced creator zones on the surface, which is a very generous way of describing some micro texturing, where you can see on the lateral side of the forefoot, you have these bumps right here that are fairly significant, but honestly, you don't feel much when it comes to actually making contact with the ball. And then here on the medial side, you're gonna find some texturing kind of embossed in the upper from that knitted base. If we move to the new generation, you'll notice that those kind of spikier textures are now kind of in these streaks or little lines. It reminds me a lot of the texturing that we saw on the Jabulani match ball from the 2010 World Cup, but in general, they're a lot less raised off the surface of the upper than what we had previously, so the texturing has actually been reduced with this latest generation. And then on the medial side, the embossed texturing in the knitted base is actually a little bit more significant, but the end result in terms of making contact with the ball, I would argue more so down to the matte finish that this colorway has, is a little bit less grippy, but at the end of the day, it's a change that I don't think really impacts the overall experience much at all. Beyond that, you can see through the midfoot where you have the Fusion Fit Plus band area, the pattern is a little bit different on the 1.4 versus what you have in kind of the more scattered pattern that almost looks like spray paint overspray on the 1.3. But in terms of what you can actually feel, the tightness around your foot, the shape of this area of the upper as well, it feels identical to what they were doing before. So realistically, your major changes coming in the texture here, everything else is totally identical. All this to say that if you already have the Future Z 1.3, there really isn't much of a reason to upgrade to the Future Z 1.4 unless you're just after the latest model, the latest colorway, or if your 1.3s are genuinely worn out and need replacing. Which also means that if you are on the market for a new pair of football boots and the Future Z was on your list of considerations, you would be much better off buying a pair of Future Z 1.3s that are deeply discounted than spending closer to full retail on the newest model. The question now remains, is the Future Z, whether it's the 1.3 or the 1.4, to the same performance standard as the newer models that have come out? Is this still a top tier option? Well, to make a long story short, yes it is. I still think the Future Z, whether it's the 1.3 or the 1.4, is one of the most comfortable football boots on the market. And for those that are a big fan of that knitted sock-like feel from their football boots, this is hands down the very best option that you can buy right now. The Evo knit material used through the forefoot and toe box area is soft, pliable, has the perfect amount of padding to where it doesn't feel so thin like you aren't wearing any shoes at all, but just has that little bit of cushion to kind of take the edge off. The little bit of texturing that you have on the surface makes it feel relatively grippy on the ball without being overly grippy. And then obviously the Fusion Fit Plus band through the midfoot, I think, is one of the key highlights of the Future Z concept, and something they've done really well with this latest generation, in that it is one of those football boots that Puma do mention that you can wear laceless. I personally wouldn't recommend it. I just think it makes the boots worse. But what I love about this system and the fact that you can wear them laceless is it has really good tension to it. It wraps across the top of your foot really, really closely and doesn't necessarily squeeze your foot to the point where it's uncomfortable, but it hugs your foot really snug, which gives you this really custom kind of one-to-one sensation. And the way the laces are anchored to the upper really allows for tightness across the top of the foot without the lower parts of the upper feeling like they are kind of squeezing your feet and making for that uncomfortable kind of pinching sensation, especially around the arch of your foot, that so many tight-fitting football boots can have. Because of this design, the laces are anchored by way of actual knitted lace loops that are kind of zigzagging all the way up the foot. But when you tie the laces tight, what I love about it is you get that nice, secure, locked-in sensation, again, without the upper feeling like it's overly structured, overly rigid on your foot. It's one of those uppers that, like a pair of socks, really feels like it moves nicely with your foot as you're running and bending and doing all the things that your feet are going to do while playing the game of football. Moving to the rear, you're going to find what is kind of a low-cut construction, but also kind of a mid-cut one. I would personally consider it to be a low. These extension pieces are pretty much just stretchy material that you don't feel at all. Certainly no ankle support provided by them. You're going to find an internal plastic heel counter that's super solid. The heel lining material remains unchanged from the previous generation. It's this really soft kind of microfiber material. Not a ton of padding back there, but I think just enough to feel comfortable and obviously keep your heel nice and locked in place. And then I think one of the best insoles you're going to find on a pair of top-end football boots in their nano grip lining material, which has this kind of soft silicone texturing to it to prevent your feet from sliding around inside the football boots. And then of course, the black foam insole with the perforated yellow inserts, basically the entirety of the bottom of the insole. Again, nothing special as far as the foam is concerned, but I really like the liner. As a base, you're going to find the dynamic motion system, which of course was introduced on the original Future Z 1.1 and of course makes its way to the latest model. It's a sole plate and stud pattern design that, according to Puma, is focused more so around kind of agility and quick changes of direction as well as just overall speed. And I'm not sure that the design really translates into feeling quite like that. The sole plate construction is more like that of a split sole, despite kind of looking like a solid sole plate, where the stud plate in the forefoot and the stud plate in the heel are connected by this fairly thick kind of diagonal bar, almost creating this Z shape like the Future Z name. But if you feel kind of along the sides, there's still a hard sole plate underneath. So you basically have an internal sole plate and then a stud plate on top, which creates a feel that I would say is a little bit bulkier than I think most people would expect, but one that ultimately feels fine. It's got more of a flexible sensation to it once broken in. And as far as modern football boot sole plate tech, I can't say that there's much standout in terms of sensation compared to other options out there, but at the same time, I really don't have any issues with it. And then, as far as the stud pattern is concerned, like other Puma models, these are labeled as FG-AG, although I definitely think that they are best suited for use on firm natural grass, not just because of the length of the studs, but also the kind of half-bladed shape that they have. All the studs are kind of this semicircle with a flat bladed edge, where again, the idea here is agility, rotational movements, having that freedom to twist and pivot that you get with a conical stud that just turns really easily when planted in the ground, but also having that sharp bladed edge to push off on and give you that bite that you expect from a pair of speed boots. Again, not really a standout in terms of overall feel or performance, but it gets the job done and kind of holds its own against almost anything. And then there's the weight, where whenever we see these new models that are hardly any different, there's always the question is maybe they took some weight out of areas of the football boot that you can't necessarily see. Both in the same size 9.5 US, The Future Z 1.3, now the outgoing model, weighs in at 7.6 ounces, the equivalent of 216 grams. Change the scale back to ounces, and we'll throw on the new Future Z 1.4, and you can see that they weigh in at 8.05 ounces, the equivalent of 228 grams. So it's not a gigantic weight difference, but the Future Z 1.4 somehow has actually gained some weight. And then finally, and unsurprisingly, the Future Z 1.4 on feet feels identical to that of the 1.3. No difference in shape, no difference in softness of the upper, just the texturing on the surface, and that's about it, which is not a bad thing because I still think this is one of the most comfortable football boots currently on the market, especially if you're looking for that soft knitted sock-like feel against your foot. The way that this upper with that Fusion Fit Plus band through the midfoot wraps your foot is unlike anything else, and with the laces tied tight, you get that tension across the top without the squeezing, kind of suffocating sensation that so many tight-fitting football boots can have. It moves nicely with your foot. The sole plate feels solid underfoot. The heel lockdown is really good. Again, you can wear them as laceless boots if you choose to do so. It's free to try, obviously, if you have them. Just pull the laces out, but I definitely think the lockdown and overall performance characteristics tend to suffer without the laces, so it's something to play around with, but probably not something I would recommend. As far as width is concerned, they have plenty of width to them. They do fit snug through the midfoot because of how that material is designed to stretch to the exact shape of your foot, so despite the tighter fit, they're still going to be suitable for most foot types, even if your feet are on the wider side. And as far as sizing is concerned, just like past Future Z models, they do run a little bit long, but not necessarily enough to go down in size. I'm still wearing these in my usual size 9.5 US, and I would say they run about a quarter size long. So unless your boots are already a little bit too big, in which case you might want to go a half size down, for most people, going true to size is probably what I'd recommend. So, given all the new football boots that have come out in 2022, is the Future Z 1.4 still a good buy? The answer to that question is a simple yes. At $200 rather than $250 plus for your Nike or Adidas alternatives, I think there's just a ton of value for money to be had from the latest variation of the Future Z, especially if you're after something with a laceless design. I don't love these as laceless football boots, but for $200 versus $275 plus that you end up paying for an Adidas alternative, I think these are every bit as good as far as laceless football boots go. Price aside, I think this is a football boot with the best knitted upper and the most comfortable knitted upper currently on the market. It all around performs extremely well and offers a fit and comfort level that really is unique compared to anything else that's currently available. If comfort is a priority and you're really looking for that sock-like feel, by all means, the Future Z 1.3 or 1.4 should definitely be on your list of considerations.